What's up, everybody? My name's Nukinfutz because I'm effing nuts. So with the announcement of Cata Classic, I've been getting a lot of questions about Warlock and if we will suck with all the massive changes on the horizon. In this video, I'm going to attempt to explain our role in Cata and whether or not you should just reroll Mage like a traitorous flavor of the month chaser. Just kidding, I love you too, mages, but just know that I will fight you for Dragon Wrath. So the first thing I want to touch on is the idea that Demonology will be the new most popular spec for us Warlocks. Affliction and Destruction are still good in terms of damage, but their overall utility and usefulness in the raid is lacking in comparison to Demonology. As a result, it will be better to run a stackable class with more damage, such as Fire Mage, especially when Dragon Wraths are everywhere. All Warlocks do bring Soul Stones as a B-Res, which may be used after a player is already dead, so the same as Druids. No more guessing which idiot in your raid is going to die on every given pull. But yeah, this may give more of a reason to run another Warlock or two instead of the one token Warlock for the Demonic Pact spell power buff. Speaking of Demonic Pact, it has been changed to give a flat 10% spell power buff instead of being based on the spell power of the user. So our main competition for raid spots will be Elemental Shamans. This is because they bring the exact same buff as us, but they also bring a few other buffs. So to keep your raid spots safe, we have to bring some firepower alongside our spell power buff and B-Res. Thankfully, we can pump fairly well. Throughout this vid, I am showing some heroics and a quick Baradin hold to give an idea about how much damage Demo Warlock can do, barring heavy gear disparities of course. There will be some fights that Elemental Shaman will be better on though, due to their mobility and utility. If you are in a sweaty guild, I would suggest having an Elemental Shaman alt in your back pocket to bring in on select bosses during prog. But for most of us, the difference between the two will be mostly negligible, and you'll be content with your performance in the raid anyways. Another awesome change made to Warlocks is the addition of the spell Dark Intent. This is an external buff similar to Focus Magic, so prepare yourself to be whispered, "Give DI!" by every slimy S-Priest, Boomy, and Fire Mage that you see. Dark Intent gives both you and your target a flat 3% haste straight up. On top of this, you'll both gain some periodic damage and healing increases. This is quite a powerful buff and just another solid reason to bring Warlocks into raids. So, I think it's safe to say that Warlock is in a pretty good spot in Cata, and your raid spots should be secure. Now I know a lot of you consider Demo to not be very fun, and a simple spec to play in general, which is mostly true in comparison to Affliction at the time, but I want to showcase some of the changes to the opener, single target rotation, and the Aoe rotation to try and convince some of you Affliction players to stay on our Giga Chad team instead of going off to play with the other mage rerollers. To start off with, we have a much more profound opener than a simple meta, apply dots, and then pump. With 5 seconds left in the pull timer, you will Soul Burn to be used a bit later in the opener, you will Soul Harvest to obtain your Soul Shard back, pre-pot a second before the boss is pulled as usual, COE if needed, activate Fellstorm from your Felguard, pop your new cooldown Demon Soul, cast a quick Incinerate SB for the same 5% crit debuff as in Warlock, pop meta, and apply your Immolate, Doom, and Corruption. When Fellstorm ends, you will instantly summon a Fellhound, do a quick Hand of Gul'dan, pop Immolation Aura if in melee, Shadow Flame if in melee, and finally end with a Doomguard snapshotted with as many buffs as you can. Phew, quite a mouthful and a lot of new spells and concepts introduced as you may have noticed. You will definitely want to practice this opener on the training dummy for a while, and it will feel amazing getting it right and being rewarded with big hits of dopamine while looking at the damage meter. I will explain all of these new concepts, such as pet twisting, new soul shards, etc., more in depth in a future Demo Warlock Cata guide video. Moving on to our new single target rotation. You will want to maintain Immolate on the target, which is refreshed by Hand of Gul'dan, so ideally you will only ever cast Immolate once on a boss. Maintain Doom and Corruption as usual. Shadow Flame is your next priority, if you can afford to be in melee, as it is pretty good now. Hand of Gul'dan on cooldown more or less. Cast Incinerate on Molten Core procs as we did before. Soulfires when Decimation is procced, which is now 25% instead of 35%, which is a bit sad. And your filler will either be Shadow Bolt or Incinerate depending on your spec. The Incinerate build is a slight increase in single target damage, whereas the Shadow Bolt build is a little more flexible and better at multi-target fights. I imagine most of us will run the Shadow Bolt variant outside of pure single target bosses, but I'd still recommend dual speccing both builds to swap on any given fight. Finally, we have our new Aoe Rotation. Gone are the days where we see 3 enemies and we slap our dick on the table and proceed to spam C to our heart's content without a care in the world. We have more options now in terms of AoE, and there are multiple factors at play such as number of targets, expected time to kill, and if you are in melee range. We'll start with 2 to 3 target prolonged AoE. In this situation you will apply Corruption and Immolate to all 3 targets, Bane of Doom on a primary target, and Bane of Agony on another. Shadow Flame off cooldown if in melee range, and then Shadow Bolting or incinerating different targets to keep up the 5% spell crit debuff. Refresh dots that drop if the enemy will last long enough to matter, and then feel free to pop Failstorm on cooldown. Next we have 4 to 5 target AoE. If they are expected to last longer than 10 seconds, then apply Immolate to all of them. Corruption as well if the time to kill is still looking to be a little while. Shadow Flame and pop Failstorm, and then lastly channel Hellfire. That's right, we are now Hellfiring unironically and pissing off healers in the process. What a time to be alive, or dead on the floor. Anyways, continuing on to 6 or more targets. I would recommend skipping dots and just Failstorm, Shadow Flame on cooldown, and proceed to Hellfire while running around like a chicken with its head cut off. Due to a new talent, we can actually move while channeling Hellfire. It is incredibly fun. Lastly, enemies that have a low time to kill, like under 10 seconds, I would recommend just a quick Shadow Flame and some Hellfire ticks. As you can see, Demonology is a lot more complex and an incredible spec to bring into every raid, so fear not fellow Warlocks. Your raid spot is safe, and I hope a lot of you stay on the Giga Chad Demo Warlock team, as well as a lot of new players come and check it out. But thank you all for watching the vid. Feel free to like and subscribe or leave a comment about how mages are cooler warlocks than Cata or something. Stay tuned for more Cata content in the future, and don't forget to keep pumping and being Nukinfutz.